Hey, it's Jeff. Welcome back. Let's get started. Okay. Well, you guys should see the position now. And what do we have here? The king looks very exposed, so that's the first thing that I just notice. And material's even. It's looking like maybe we're trying to checkmate, but also the g2 rook is hanging. So we got to consider, are we trying to do queen takes g2? Does white have a perpetual after that or anything? So there's no good checks with the rook. Just e6 and they could take. Queen h6 is the only other check that's not guarded by their rook. But after like queen h6, king d5, well, in that case, maybe queen e6, and it extends a little bit, but king c5, and maybe they're getting away. Although queen h6, after king d7, there's also queen e6 check. But after queen h6, king c7, then maybe we have rook e7. So now we gotta see, like, is there really a mate with queen h6, or are we just taking the rook and avoiding perpetual if possible? So that the line where they went to king c7 looked like it was almost checkmate. So it's gonna lead me to try to calculate that one further and see if there's actually a mate after queen h6 that's forced. So queen h6, and let's say king c5. That might be the most difficult one to meet. So it looks like the main check at that point is queen f8 check. And let's say king b5. But then we have stuff like rook b3 check. So every time I look at something, I find a million checks as a follow-up. So queen h6, let's get king d5, queen e6 check, king c5, queen e7 check, let's say king c4 there. And then queen e6 check. They can go queen d5 and block. And we have queen a6 check, but they could block again with the queen with b5. And maybe it's not leading into much there. So now I finally found a line that didn't look like it was going to lead to much. So now I want to put more attention to just taking the rook. Because it might not even, because I don't think there is a perpetual. So after taking the rook, there's queen d8. We could bring the rook back. I mean, bring the queen. No, okay. Yeah, queen takes g2, queen d8. If queen g8, there's queen f6. We go queen g7. Then they go queen d8 again. And maybe that should be avoided. That might be a perpetual for them. But after queen takes g2, queen d8, we can go king g7 check. And then let's say queen d7 check, king h6. And then the queen on g2 can be a defense. And if the queen ever gets to g6, then it's a check on white's king. So I want to take the rook. I don't think there's a mate after queen h6. And I don't think we're losing any material back. Okay, so yeah, so maybe this was the point of the problem, is that if you go queen g8 here, queen f6 looks to be a perpetual. So you have to go queen g7. They go back. You can't move the king. You can't bring this rook back or else it'll get taken. So you would have to go queen g8, and they could just alternate between those. So king g7 only move. And so yeah, that was the point. Now let's go to the analysis board. And I'll check on the wrong moves. Okay, so one queen h6 was the main mistake. So yes, this is what I was looking at. And it looks like, it looks like it's still a little bit of an edge for black, but in some lines it just might be too difficult to do anything. So yeah, so at this point I was looking at queen f8, but the engine likes rook e8 and gives an advantage for black, but it's not really winning anything on the spot like taking the rook is. So in comparison, this isn't really going to lead to much, and then my move does lead to a draw. So yeah, they give this line queen f7, king c5. And it's just, there's no way to skewer and win the queen or really checkmate. Like there's these pawns and queens guarding a lot of the common access to the king. And so it's really just saying that, okay, you're able to just take this rook and there's no problem. Now, the next most common mistake was queen g8. After about right here. So queen g8, as I said, they can go queen f6, and now you have to move the queen, and they just go back. And now you pretty much have to move the queen back, and they just repeat. So both the mistakes, either going queen h6 or move 1, or queen g8 on move 2 were played about the same. So 1,400 mistakes for each, pretty much. And then other than that, there weren't really too many big mistakes. Rook e6 on move 1 was like the next common thing, but there was only like 70 people that played that, so they just went for a sacrifice, maybe trying to get the king more to the center for some reason, but there's not really much, because if the plan was just to take this, you could have taken it in the first place and saved your material advantage. And the queen can't do anything, and it's not even, you're not even able to make a perpetual or any type of draw with just the queen in this situation. So okay. Let's go back and try another one. All right, in-game type. Now the first thing I see is, well, just immediately looking at f5, then if the bishop took, then knight e7 forks the king and bishop. But I'm wondering if rook b5 check, if they're ever picking the material back up. But what are the features of the position? So they have a pass pawn. We have a pass pawn. Their king is very limited on squares at the moment. And so like literally the only square they could move to is h5. So I'm wondering if, given that in mind, can we set up a checkmate in that? I'm looking at ideas like f5 and then knight f4, because f4 would also guard h5, but that gives them the g5 square. But then could we go rook g7? So let's see, f5, and bishop takes f5, knight f4, check. The only move is king g5, and then rook g7. Now what squares can black go to? They can only block with the bishop, with bishop g6, and we have a knight on f4, so we can take, and that would be checkmate, if my visualization is okay. Now there's another, I don't remember what it was, but there was another option that they could try that we had to calculate. So if f5, okay, so they don't have to take with the bishop, but we do know if they take with the bishop, we can force a checkmate. But f5, they can go king g5 or king h5, but we might be able to set up the same checkmate pattern. So after f5, king h5, knight f4 check, then king g5, rook g7, checkmate, and f5, king g5, rook g7, king h5, knight f4, checkmate. So hopefully I'm seeing all this right, but it looks like f5 is the way to go, and we should be checkmating. And so again, the positional feature that I kind of noticed was the king has very limited mobility. And so it's possible to just set up this mating net. Okay, so now we go knight f4, and then rook g7, and then take. So that was, I think that was the first line we calculated till mate. Out of those, there's like 3 different tries or something. Okay, so let's bring up the analysis board. And I will check on the wrong moves. So 2 knight e7 was the first mistake. So at this point, they went knight e7. That was the first line that I kind of saw, like the first idea in the whole position that you could do this. After king g5, knight takes here. I was thinking something like this, and then you move, and then you do that. But the computer actually likes here. And yeah, so the king is gonna have to, because they have the opposition, black has opposition, so the king has to move out the way, and then you just pick up it like that. Pick it up like that. So let's see, what else do we have? Rook c6 on move 1. So here, and this kind of, this gets rid of the scope of the of our pieces, so we're giving them a lot of escape room, and so there's not going to be a checkmate after you make a move like rook c6. So the question is, what idea did you see after this? Maybe maybe they just thought king h7 and we get this fork, but the problem is they have these other squares to go to. And actually, yeah, so king h7 would be losing for black, but king g7 and king f7 is just a draw. And knight e7 on move 1. So knight e7 right here. And this is kind of, well, it does give access to this this file right now, but they could just go here and, okay, so maybe we're trying to promote this pawn, is the idea, but their pawn is also pretty fast. Let's see what they push here. Yeah, they would make a queen first and end up winning. But the key to this puzzle was to see that you could maybe create this mating net, and the rook and knight combo, it can be really helpful. Like the hook mate, that was one of the tags, and it's a common checkmating pattern, especially when you have like a pawn that can support a knight. In some cases, I don't know if that wasn't the case in this one, but there are some hook mates where the pawn comes into like a more key role into that type of pattern. But here it's just a sacrifice. And it was actually their pawn that kind of blocked them and made this possible. Like if they didn't have this H pawn, they would have another square to escape to. So it was a combination of our pieces limiting their activity and their own pieces getting in the way. So lack of coordination. And in all the situations, so like I said, they could go here, then you get this, and then checkmate. They could also go here first, but then you just alter the order of moves, and then you'll be okay. All right, so hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching.